Hi there, guys, and welcome to episode 3 of the SDR DiscoCall podcast. I'm your host, Neil Bhuiyan. Today's guest is Elana Freeman, who is actually a former student of mine, and we're going to be discussing how Elana went from retail sales, went traveling around the world in Asia, and then decided to start with SaaS, her onboarding experience, and how she's currently progressing into an inside sales role at Secure Code Warrior. So how does the SDR DiscoCall podcast work? Well, it's actually a discovery call, hence the name. And every Tuesday at 8 a.m, we're going to have a brand new SDR for 30 minutes and an agenda of introductions, their SDR story, and 3 key takeaways that they've learned to share with other SDRs. So with that in mind, let's begin. So I'm really excited to introduce the next guest. This is Elana Freeman, and funnily enough, Elana was actually one of my former students and a top student at that, and is actually currently one of our poster girls in a lot of the happy selling trainings. And I'm super excited for Elana to come on the show today to kind of give us her SDR story. So on that note, Elana, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you, Neil. How are you?
I'm super. Thank you very much for asking. So, Elana, to help set the scene, could you just let the listeners know who are you currently, what do you do, and where are you working at the moment?
Certainly. So, my name is Elana Freeman. I am an ISR, so that's an inside sales representative. I work at a company called Secure Code Warrior, and Secure Code Warrior helps developers write secure code. Simple as that.
Cool. So you're kind of in the cybersecurity space, is that right?
Yes. Cybersecurity, application security. Yeah.
Okay. So for a lot of techie people out there, so who are the like normal type of prospects or people that you're trying to reach out to have discussions with?
So I speak typically with, let's say, information security managers, chief information security officers, most commonly known as CISOs, security architects. Sometimes learning and development comes into play because we can be seen as a training tool, even though we're more of a program. Mm-hmm. And let's give you one more. CTOs, chief technology officers.
Okay, cool. And how long have you been at Secure Code Warrior, Elana?
I have been at Secure Code Warrior since May 2018. So that's just over 2 years now.
Okay, cool. And really kind of a good question people want to understand is kind of what prompted you to get into sales and, starting at Secure Code Warrior? What's the story behind that?
Well, I'm sure everybody has been in the situation and they felt, I actually never grew up thinking, I want to be in sales.
Yeah.
I mean, fair enough for people that did. That definitely wasn't how I envisioned my career path to go. And when I remember when I always used to ask people when I was younger, how did you get into your job? How did you know you wanted to be this person? They said, I just fell into it. And I'd be like, wow, how do people fall into jobs? But I actually feel like I fell into my job and now I know how it works.
So, and like prior to kind of Secure Code Warrior, if I remember, like you used to work in sales at Ted Baker, you'd done a bit of traveling and volunteer work. What was going on kind of before you jumped into that sales job?
Just the opportunity came around when I was working at Ted Baker in Selfridges as a sales assistant. The main goal was to actually earn money to go traveling. Then I went traveling for about 15 months. And even during my travels, I worked in hospitality. So everything I've done so far has been very much customer facing, very much people focused, communication and interaction.
Wow. Okay. So working in the retail space, working in front of customers, getting that kind of experience, then traveling around the world as well, doing some jobs. What kind of places did you travel to? What countries, what sights and sounds did you see on those travels, Elana?
Gosh, it was the best time. So I started off in Southeast Asia. So that was Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, went to Bali for a bit. Then I went home for 2 weeks, essentially changed all the clothes that I had and whipped them around to be able to make me go to South America, because it was a very, very different experience. And then I went to Colombia, Brazil. Yeah, I went to Brazil for a bit. I went to Peru, Bolivia. Then I flew over to Australia, lived there for 9 months and worked at a little place called Airlie Beach, which was a very, very fun time. It was basically like going back to uni.
Yeah.
And then I went to New Zealand for 5 weeks, and then I went home.
Wow. So you've seen a lot of sights and sounds and different tastes, and then you came back to Blighty in London. And kind of, so a lot of people that I've met in the past, they've either started like a corporate sales job, or like ourselves, they've gone into kind of the startup phase. What was your journey kind of finding that first job like when you got back? What was that experience like?
So I wanted to work as soon as I got back, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And another opportunity came around for me to just be a receptionist at a local orthodontist near my house. So I did that for a bit just to kind of ease me back into normal life. And then I started on my LinkedIn. I made myself I selected available looking for jobs, and a recruitment company reached out to me. They're called Venatrix, and they essentially hire, well, they get people on board and recruit them towards SaaS SaaS companies. At the time, they were just looking at SDR roles, but I do believe since then they've actually expanded to more senior roles.
Cool.
That recruitment process was interesting in itself. I didn't actually put much pressure on myself, because it was the first, because I had to go through an assessment center with them, and I just went along. I thought, oh, it's the first one. Realistically, who knows what can happen? But they wanted me to, represent them. And then I had a few interviews, and slowly but surely, Secure Code Warrior found me, or I found them.
Wicked. That is an amazing journey. And something that I've experienced myself when using the term SDR, or people that are looking for new sales jobs, they come across that acronym of sales development rep. When you first heard SDR, what was your understanding of it, and what did it mean to you back then?
I don't know. I didn't really have much visibility, because I think SaaS organizations are unique in their own way.
Yeah.
And typically, so none of my friends, interestingly enough, are actually in sales.
Yeah.
I didn't really have that visibility to what it's like to work in sales. It felt quite new to me, and it also felt quite daunting, because you almost go in with a sense of like there's not that much security because of the commissions, not even know, like, and the way sales is sometimes portrayed out there in the wider world. So I think the way it was positioned to me was more business development, putting yourself out there. And I just thought those skills are very valuable, and those skills will take me much further than anything that I could probably start with. And not to say that I didn't back myself, but, I had a degree. I went to Nottingham University, but I did a degree in economics, because I genuinely thought, that could help me open doors. But yeah, being an SDR, I thought was actually probably going to be the best first step.
And it was definitely a good step to take. So well done for doing that. So obviously, like, you've gone through this process with Venatrix, you've then bumped into Secure Code Warrior. What was that process like about joining the company, interviewing with them, and trying to figure out, is it a fit for Elana?
So interesting. So I did, like I said, so Venatrix set me up with a few interviews, one of which didn't go well. And I was like, was it me? Was it the company? But then when I met David, one of my old managers, I just knew that this is how the interview is meant to go. We had a conversation. I felt comfortable. We got on really well. And then when I compared it to interviews that hadn't gone well, I thought, okay, it wasn't just me. And I think it was quite a fairly swift interview process. And that might be because there was only about 25 people in the company at the time. So it's not like there were loads of people to go through. I probably had about 3 interviews, one with the manager, one with someone that I'd be working with closely in the office, and one with the CEO.
Cool, perfect. And obviously we'll get back into secure code warrior like that at the beginning of that journey. But I think it's really interesting to hear about, you said you went through some interviews and they weren't that great. And obviously you had your chat with David and that was good. What was it about those things that kind of gave you red flags to think, that's not really a company I want to join into?
I wish I could remember the story, because I actually almost had a bit of an argument. I'm not an argumentative person at all, but this guy was rubbing me up the wrong way, and I can't really remember why, but I just think he was questioning my integrity, and I just felt a bit, I was a bit taken aback, and I just thought, no, like, I didn't feel comfortable during the interview process. This phone conversation hasn't been that enjoyable. This isn't going well. So yeah, I guess that was an experience in itself, considering I didn't actually have a job I didn't have any SDR job at the time.
Yeah. But no, definitely, I agree. Like, it's all about that initial experience, not just for companies to vet SDRs, but the SDRs that are going to go take on that job. They also have to feel, the company cares, they've done their research, they're asking the right questions, and they're looking for the right people. But that process in itself has to be good. And by the sounds of it, you had a better experience with David at SCW. So really happy to hear that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have never met, So it was a good thing.
Yeah.
So again, some of these listeners that are in, they may be thinking about applying for an SDR job or, going up for their first interview. What kind of tips would you give them to kind of prepare them and get them ready for that sort of interview experience?
I think if you're going for the SDR role, don't put too much pressure on yourself. You're not expected to be perfect. SDR roles are you're meant to be someone that is very moldable, in the way that there's so much to learn. So don't feel like you need to know everything. I think as well, being yourself is great, because it's all about personality. It's very much either phone to phone, face to face sort of job. So if you know that I'm sure you've got a great personality. So try and make it shine. Obviously, don't go OTT. That's quite hard to do in maybe like a half an hour interview.
Yeah.
But if you can show the sort of personality you have, then they're more likely to get to want to see more of it and be able to see how you can actually fit in with the organization. Because what I'm seeing a lot, even in the conversations I'm having now with prospects, with clients, is that culture is so important in an organization. And of course, it's about the skills and your capability. But as an SDR, that's the beauty, is that you're given the opportunity to actually grow. So if you have that, at the time when I was being hired, I'd never been an SDR. I had only learned when SDR was probably a month before my interview with David. So actually, I genuinely believe it was myself, my culture and my personality, the way I presented myself that opened that door for me. A nice memory. So when throughout my SDR career, obviously not obvious, but sometimes I would doubt myself, because it is a hard role. And I was so new to it, and I was always asking for guidance, which would bring me swiftly onto how I met you, but don't want to jump too far ahead. And I once asked David, I just said, so why did you hire me? And this was maybe 6 months down the line. And I remember him saying, at that interview, you approached me. So I remember I was early. I recognized David's picture. He was sitting in wherever our interview was. I think it was like maybe a hotel lobby.
Yeah.
And he was on his laptop, had a glass of wine, very David. And I just went up to him and I was like, David. And I think for him, that's what he liked. It set the interview off to a good start. So, just go for it. That's something that I would do anyway, wherever I am. If I see friends out, I go up to them and say hi. Why wouldn't I do that with someone who I'm potentially going to be working with?
I love that. So that's basically taking the initiatives, being fearless, just walking up and just sparking off the conversation. And that's what we have to do as SDRs, right? We have to have that sort of feeling inside us to want to speak to people, because that's what we do best. But I absolutely love that story. And I'm sure when he hears this back in the coming weeks, he's going to love that story as well and remember it. So obviously, like you said, you've gone into the role, you've successfully become an SDR, and like you're going through like the initial sort of training and just getting on the phones and stuff like that. What was going through your mind when you were learning all these like techniques and who you had to speak to and learning about your company and its culture and all of that? What was that experience like?
It was daunting when I look back, but it was also very insightful. I learned a lot about myself, how I should be communicating. If I just take you through, I guess, my introduction. So, my final interview was with my CEO, Peter Danu. And then after that, it was kind of like, okay, now you're part of Secure Codes Warrior, rock up at 9:30 on a Tuesday morning at WeWork, one of the WeWorks in Moorgate.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I walked into an office, and there was one other person in the office, someone who had just been hired a month before me to do the same role. And we were the first two people doing this role in the whole organization. And there was only two other people. So there was four people in the office altogether, including myself. So it was very much, your job, now execute, and, jump on calls, listen to what's going on in conversations. These are the people these are your personas that you need to reach out to. LinkedIn is great, jump on the phones, use emails. I didn't have any tool like at the moment. We have Outreach, but there was no sort of sales enablement tool. So it was like me, creating Google Doc sheets, or to some other people, the equivalent is like Microsoft Excel, to be able to keep track of what I was doing. And it felt, the reason why I was daunting is like it felt manic. It was like there was so much to do, and I had to learn about what the company did. I had to learn about security, cybersecurity. It's like a whole different world. Going to events, I was being encouraged to meet people face to face. So I just was thrown into it. But I think that's a great way for it to learn, and to try learn quickly. And I do remember the day that everything just clicked. And it wasn't a month or 2 months afterwards. It was quite a while afterwards where everything clicked. And when it did, it felt great, and it made me realize that whole onboarding process, if you want to call it that, that built a lot of resilience.
I love it. So like a baptism of fire, perseverance of a lot of madness and new things going on, and then one day it just all fell into place. Is that right?
Yeah, I had that moment, that moment where everything just clicked, and I felt it. And I think it was when I realized, because as an SDR, so typical SDRs, I know, their job is to book meetings, book X number of meetings a month. But the nature of Secure Codes Warrior isn't necessarily, book the meetings and that's what you're doing. I was kind of surrounded by colleagues that were very supportive and wanted to help me progress. So, being able to maybe get to run demos, that was the next step. And I realized when I could do that, or maybe even do that on my own without any assistance, I was like, oh, I do understand what I'm doing. I can ask the right questions, and I can get to the next step.
100%. I think there's a really good saying that I learned during lockdown, which is sometimes you have to believe in others' belief of you before it kicks in for yourself. And to your point, having a really supportive team behind you to kind of like gear you on and cheer you on. And it's something I did a lot of the time when we used to have our one-to-ones, I remember, and I just used to sit and think like, you know it, and I don't want to tell you because I want you to get it yourself. And I'm really like proud to see like how you've grown in the past year or so. But obviously, like things have moved on a little bit. You're currently like really progressing into your role. Kind of what's going on in your world right now? Like, where are you now?
So now the organization doesn't officially have SDRs. We're now called ISRs, which is, like I said at the beginning, so we're inside sales reps. And our role is to qualify leads, create opportunities, to have those discovery calls, create opportunities, and also take those opportunities to what we have as a trial stage. The platform that we have is used by developers. So a typical part of the process is for the developers to actually trial out the platform, try Secure Code Warriors, see if it's something that they can see working with their everyday life in their own office or at home. And so we found as an organization, taking opportunities to trial is far more valuable than just asking us to just book those demos. So I need to not only make sure that I can create opportunities, qualify those leads, but also take those opportunities further along the sales cycle to trial stage. So that's what's going on at the moment with me in my official role. There's of course loads of projects going on the side to do with, let's say, sales enablement. I did a trivia last night on Indigenous peoples. That's part of our culture program in August.
Nice.
August is all about Indigenous peoples, and it was a global initiative. So I also do stuff like that on the side. Warriors Give Back is what we call that.
So that's kind of like a philanthropic cause, like within the company, and you're part of that. Is that right?
Yeah.
Cool. And as you mentioned, like you're obviously doing parts in the company, like the role has now evolved slightly more than just, like you say, booking meetings. How did you find the process of, like, you came in initially as an SDR to help book meetings, and now you're taking it on a bit further? You mentioned also that you're kind of doing demos as well. Mm-hmm. What was the learning curve like that from transitioning from initial meeting booker to kind of like doing more of the actual sales process itself as well?
Well, fortunately for me, it's been gradual. It hasn't been okay, and today you have to do X, Y. Like you have 3 more responsibilities on your plate. It was all very gradual, daunting again at sometimes, because you think, gosh, can I do this? But I always knew I had the right support network. So one thing that I know works really well with ISR or SDR roles is having your respective AE there to guide you along the way. And I've been very fortunate enough to have a very supportive AE, and you just know that you wouldn't be given that responsibility unless they trusted that you could take it on. And I almost sometimes ask myself, or like I sometimes tell myself, it's okay if I fail. That's not a problem. I'd rather fail sooner rather than later, and be given the opportunities. So, taking on that more responsibility, I did feel like I was ready for it. I was probably already doing it without even realizing. But yeah, it being gradual definitely helped.
I love it. And you mentioned a very big key piece, which I'm a huge fan of, is kind of like the SDR and AE harmony. So working with your closer, them kind of giving you some reins to try stuff out because they trust you. Mm-hmm. Like, walk us through like the introduction to your AE, how you guys work together today, kind of what's that relationship like, and how has this person helped you to become like who you are and what you're doing now?
So my AE is called Sean Madigan. I don't think he'll mind me mentioning his name. He is quite modest, but anyhow. So when we started at Secure Code Warrior, when I started at Secure Code Warrior, he was sort of the only sales guy in the room. So I think it's been a journey together. Now him and I are, I guess you could say, EMEA's longest standing sales employees. So how we work now is very much, it's always been about communication. It's always been about making sure that we're both on the same page. It's making sure that we're being transparent with each other. If I've got any bone to pick, which I don't, it would never get to that, because we're so transparent, because we always talk about what's going on in our own worlds. I think something that's really important as a partnership is to actually know what drives the other person, whether or not what's going to help them reach their commission, their actual target, or what's that, and also what's going to help them help them with the future. That's always important. But I think the best way to describe our partnership is just communication and supporting each other. If an emergency ever happened, I know that he'd be there for me and I'd be there for him. And furthermore, if I go away for 2 weeks, I trust that Sean will be able to handle anything that comes his way that was meant to be my responsibility. And I think the same would be for him.
Love it. It's really good to have that sort of strong bond with your account executive. So if I get it right, it's a case of transparency, constant communication, kind of know where you're standing with things, but having each other's backs. And that's kind of how you guys have built your relationship to help each other out. Is that right?
Yeah, it says, and it's worked, which is good.
And obviously, we never know. There could be some account executives that are listening in because they want to have a better relationship with their SDRs. If an AE is listening and they're not sure, what advice would you give to that AE to get the best out of their SDR, Elana?
Treat them as your equal. Coach them. Almost be open with you wanting them to eventually be in your role, because then it's not a competition where you're not competing against each other. We want to help you. So, and we will help you, because that is our job. But by you helping us makes us almost be more motivated to do so.
So AEs, if you're listening out, those are some golden nuggets being dropped by Elana, and I 100% agree with that. It's at the end of the day, it's a team effort. You guys have to work together, not against each other, and you're both batting for the same side. So it's important to have that AE. And again, if any listeners are in there and they're kind of new to this role, my recommendation is within your first week, just book, 30 minutes with your AE, maybe take them out for lunch to get to know each other. I think that's always a great icebreaker as well. So Elana, with obviously you're doing your role and stuff, and I remember just before this podcast, we was having a conversation about progression and kind of like what the future holds, etc. And this was a conversation you and me used to have a lot of in our one-on-ones, where you were thinking you weren't sure if you want to move into this role, or is the SDR role for you? Because there were times it wasn't all roses and sunshine. There were tough times as well. And I remember us one day, we was down by London Wall, and we was having a heart-to-heart about kind of what is the future, kind of where are things going. And I said, you know what, you've got it. You've got that spirit, just stick at it. Kind of how do you deal with tough situations, and how do you think about career for future, and how have you dealt with those tough times?
Neil, I think I got a bit emotional when we were down. I remember exactly the moment you're talking about, and I remember trying to almost hold back tears, just because I think it's so important to show vulnerability. Fortunately, I'm very comfortable with that. I think, as much as I say communication with your AE, I just think communication with anybody. If you're feeling something, then, and you have a good relationship with a colleague, that you feel that yes, maybe you just want to vent, but also, constructive criticism or just advice, anything, they can't guess what's happening in your mind. So I think tough situations, talk about it. Everyone's been in the same, everyone would have been in your shoes, and the good thing about being, I guess, young in an organization and also at a fairly junior role is that you can feel that everybody above you has probably felt every emotion that you've had.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many opportunities there to learn not only about your skill development, but also about your emotional intelligence, how to cope with being in the workplace. That's not always an easy feat. So the tough times, as well with the role, not hitting targets, having no one respond to you for a significant period of time. You think, God, what's happening? Is it me? No, it's not me, but still, why is it not happening? But then persevere, get through those down days. It will happen because as long as you're doing the right thing. And I remember you always used to say to me, as long as you're doing the right thing, it will happen. And it did.
It did, indeed.
What was the second part of the question? I was talking about getting through those tough times, but there was another part.
Yeah, so in terms of you were somebody who wanted to, like myself, when I was an SDR, I wanted to progress quite quickly. I thought I was ready for things. And even as your coach, I used to say, I don't think you are ready. And we had that honest discussion. How have you dealt with your own ambitions and sometimes where you may find limitations in not having that experience? How have you overcome that?
Asking for help. I think during lockdown in particular. So I've been at the organization just over 2 years. And like I said at the beginning of the podcast, May 2018 was when I joined. So in the height of lockdown is when I hit my 2-year mark. And I just started to, and also I had my birthday in June. So I just started to think, oh my God, where do I want to be in 5 years' time? Where's my career path going to take me? And we were just discussing earlier, normally when you go into the office, you can have those thoughts and then you get distracted because someone's doing something hilarious, or you go out for lunch, or you go out for drinks after work, and you think, oh, whatever, it will all sort itself out, which it will. But when you're in lockdown, it's harder to take that view. You're kind of, I know at some points I was wrapped up in my own thoughts, and I just really started thinking hard. And I guess the harder you think, the more narrow-minded you become, and you can't actually see the bigger picture. So one is, yes, being patient, knowing that everything I do each day is part of the journey. But then, like I said, asking for help. So seeing where I can get that career advice from, or, maybe just being self-aware, I think is another great step to make. Being self-aware of how you're feeling, what's going through your mind, and acting on it. So speaking to someone, see, what can I do now that will help me get to where I want to be? And that might be starting a course, starting a project within the organization, or it might be, doing things outside work that make you feel happy. So maybe, I don't know, taking up a new hobby. All these skills will help when it comes to personal development, and it just makes everything, when you feel like everything's really slow and it's not moving quickly, knowing that you're doing that extracurricular, so to speak, those extracurricular activities, just means that you're moving, just not as quickly as you want to be. But the beauty of the pandemic is everything just slowed down, even our lives, which was quite nice as well.
And I'm really happy to hear you saw the beauty in that, and you're able to go on that journey of self-discovery. and get those things. And a question that I'd always ask you, like when we were working together, is like kind of what do you see the future for Elana? Like kind of where do you want to progress to? What do you want to? What thoughts have you been thinking about career wise?
Oh, Neil. What have I been thinking about career-wise? So the natural progression would be to become an AE. I think it would be silly not to go for that, because I've built all these sales skills. It'd be nice to execute it. And I even remember you saying that the best AEs would have been SDRs, because they just have that knowledge. They have those, they've already built in those listening skills. They've already built in that need for discovery, that need to find the pain. So I think that would be the most obvious next step.
And have you? No, I would agree. I thought exactly the same thing, and I think a lot of SDRs that are either in the role or currently getting into the role, they would say the same thing. But another key takeaway that I gave, like when we was together, and it's something that I teach, is that the path to the AE isn't always the same path for everyone. Similar to myself, all I wanted to be was a closer and make money and commission, and I got into it and I just found out it wasn't for me. Like I moved off into customer success because I found that I love spending time with customers even after getting the DocuSign in. But kind of like what else, like say if it wasn't going to be the sales role, what other things, kind of roles in SaaS companies interest you, Elana?
That's a hard question. I think a lot of SaaS companies are young. So, and that might be a generalization, but that's been what I've seen so far. And I have seen, even in Secure Code Warrior, roles be created. So at one point, to me, all that was available was sales, customer success, and marketing, and engineering and product. And when I joined the organization, there were about 25 to 30 people, and now there's 150. So they can't all be doing that. So I think, I don't know, is my honest response. But what I do know is there is a lot of opportunity.
I love it. So we're coming kind of to the end of our show, and I definitely feel that we could have a longer conversation. So there may be a hint to you that in a few months' time, we'd love to have you back to kind of give us an update as to how things are going along. But if we can take our minds back to that Elana who had been traveling, she'd been on the aeroplane traveling around to all these countries, and she came back home to London, and she's just about to, meet with David and start this journey with Secure Code Warrior. What would you say your 3 key takeaways that you've learned in the last 2 years that you'd like to give to that younger Elana of yourself?
I think what I would tell myself is trust your gut. Simple as that. I would tell myself to embrace the opportunity, even the hard times and the good times and the very mediocre times, because not every day is going to be not every day is going to be the worst day of my life. Not every day is going to be the best day of my life, but we move on. And I think one of the last pieces of advice would be to me that this is just the start of the journey. So go in with an open mind. And I do think I have an open mind anyway. I don't believe you can travel practically the whole world without an open mind. But, the working world, I didn't know that it could be so casual. Corporate. So I just think it's, going with an open mind into the professional world and just back yourself.
I love it. Thank you so much, Elana. So obviously there may be some listeners out there that would love to perhaps get a bit of your time to ask more questions. So obviously I will be placing notes into the show notes for your contact details, but what's the easiest way to get in contact with Elana?
LinkedIn.
And how do you like to be contacted on LinkedIn when somebody's sending you that first request note? What should go into that request note, Elana?
Wow, SDR me. Just say who you are, where you've heard me from. Probably first start off with how you know who I am, what you'd like, what your request would be, and yeah, I mean, I'd be very shocked if I ignored that.
Cool. Because I think the reason why I asked that is kind of one of the questions you used to ask me quite a lot about, Neil, what should I send on that connection request on LinkedIn? So now I'd like to put you in that hot seat to see how would you like it on the other side.
No, it's
well, Elana, it is. But Elana, thank you so much for joining the SDR DiscoCall podcast. We hope to have you as a guest in the future. And once again, happy selling, Elana.
Thank you for having me, Neil.